The Halloween party was supposed to be fun. That's what they told us in the company memo anyway. Come celebrate with your colleagues in costume, it said, all cheerful fonts and exclamation points. What they didn't mention was that it would become the night my marriage imploded in front of half the corporate headquarters of Meridian Industries. I stood near the bar, nursing my third bourbon, watching my wife Fina work the room like she owned it. She'd chosen a Catwoman costume, black leather that hugged every curve, complete with a mask that somehow made her green eyes even more predatory. I went with a pirate outfit, complete with an eye patch that kept sliding down my nose. Looking back, the symbolism was perfect. She was the hunter. I was the fool stumbling around half-blind. My name is Beck Derron, and until tonight, I thought I knew exactly who I was. 34 years old, head of IT security for a mid-sized tech company in Cleveland, former boxer turned corporate drone, married to the most beautiful woman in marketing. I had convinced myself that trading my boxing gloves for a keyboard was growing up, that Fina's ambition would lift us both to something better. What an idiot I was. Beck! Fina's voice cut through the party noise like a blade. She was standing near the DJ booth with Kurt Milan, our head of sales. Kurt looked like he'd stepped out of a men's magazine. Tall, broad shoulders, perfectly styled hair that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Tonight he was dressed as some kind of gladiator, all bronze armor and manufactured masculinity. I walked over, already feeling the weight of every eye in the room, tracking my movement. The music seemed to dim, conversations pausing as people sensed drama brewing. There you are, honey, Fina said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Kurt was just telling me about his new promotion. Congratulations, I said, offering my hand. Kurt looked at it as though I were handing him something unpleasant. Thanks, man, he said, not bothering to shake. Some of us are moving up in the world. The insult hung in the air between us. I felt my old boxing instincts stir, the familiar tension in my shoulders, the way my weight shifted to the balls of my feet. But this wasn't a ring, and I wasn't 25 anymore. Beck's been in IT for what, 5 years now? Fina continued, her voice getting louder. Same desk, same projects. Some people are just comfortable with mediocrity, I guess. A small crowd had gathered around us now. I recognized faces from accounting, marketing, even a few executives, all watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Fina, I said quietly. Maybe we should... Should what? She interrupted. Pretend everything's fine. Pretend I'm not embarrassed to introduce you to important people. Pretend I don't regret settling for someone who gave up on his dreams to fix computers. The words hit like physical blows, each one carefully chosen, designed for maximum damage. This wasn't a spontaneous outburst. This was planned, rehearsed, performed for an audience. Kurt stepped closer to Fina, his hand finding the small of her back. Some women need real men, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Not guys who peaked in high school. That's when I saw it, the look that passed between them. Not the casual flirtation of office colleagues, but something deeper, more intimate. The way his fingers traced a small circle on her back, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. The way she leaned into his touch without thinking about it. They were sleeping together. The realization should have crushed me, but instead I felt something else entirely. A cold, calculating calm that I recognized from my boxing days. The moment when you stop feeling pain and start planning your next move. You know what, Fina? I said, my voice steady despite the bourbon and the humiliation. You're absolutely right. She blinked, clearly expecting a different response. What? I said you're right. I did settle. I gave up fighting for a steady paycheck and a woman who I thought was worth it. I pulled off my wedding ring, the gold band that had circled my finger for 3 years. But I'm done settling now. I placed the ring on the high-top table next to us, the soft clink audible in the sudden silence. Beck, what are you... Fina started. I'm giving you what you want, I said. Freedom to be with someone more, suitable to your ambitions. Kurt's smirk faltered. This wasn't going according to their script. You can't be serious, Fina said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. You're just drunk and embarrassed. Oh, I'm embarrassed, I agreed, but not for the reasons you think. I turned to leave, but Fina grabbed my arm. Where are you going? Home, to start figuring out how to divide our assets. I looked directly at Kurt. Hope you can afford to keep her in the lifestyle she's become accustomed to. Marketing directors don't come cheap. Kurt's face went red. You threatening me, computer boy? Not threatening, just stating facts. I stepped closer, close enough that only he could hear me. I know things about this company's network that would surprise you, about email logs and security footage and who's been accessing what after hours. His gladiator costume suddenly looked ridiculous instead of intimidating. "You're pathetic," Fina spat, but her voice cracked slightly. Running away like always. "Not running," I said. "Planning." As I walked toward the exit, I heard her voice rise behind me. "He's lost his mind. This is what happens when weak men can't handle reality." But I also heard something else, whispered conversations starting up, people already beginning to gossip. By Monday morning, everyone would know that Beck Derron's wife had humiliated him at the Halloween party, that she was probably cheating with Kurt Milan, and that I had walked away with more dignity than anyone expected. What they wouldn't know, what none of them could predict, was what I planned to do next. I pushed through the exit doors into the cold October night, leaving behind the warmth and laughter of the party. My breath formed small clouds in the frigid air as I walked to my car, a 10-year-old Honda that Fina constantly complained about. My phone buzzed with text messages. Probably coworkers wanting gossip, maybe Fina trying to control the narrative. I ignored them all. Instead, I sat in my car for a long moment, engine running, heat slowly warming the interior. Through the windows of the event space, I could see the party continuing. Fina was back to working the room, Kurt at her side like some kind of bodyguard. They looked relieved that I was gone. They shouldn't be. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a freight train. I'd spent the weekend in my apartment. Fina had stayed at her sister's place, or so she claimed, thinking through my options. The old Beck would have confronted her directly, demanded explanations, maybe even begged her to work things out. The new Beck had better ideas. I arrived at Meridian Industries at 7:30, an hour before most people showed up. The building was a gleaming monument to corporate success, 15 floors of glass and steel rising from the Cleveland skyline like a middle finger to the Rust Belt economy that surrounded it. I'd always felt out of place here, a blue-collar kid playing dress-up in khakis and button-downs. But being underestimated had its advantages. My office was on the 8th floor, a modest space with 2 monitors, enough server access to run a small country, and a view of the parking garage where I could watch people arrive each morning. Today, I was particularly interested in one arrival. Kurt's red BMW pulled into his reserved spot at 8:15, right on schedule. But he wasn't alone. Fina emerged from the passenger side, smoothing down her skirt and checking her reflection in the car window. They didn't kiss goodbye, too risky in the company parking garage, but the intimacy was obvious in how they moved around each other. My phone buzzed, a text from Fina. "We need to talk." I ignored it and got to work. One advantage of being the IT security manager is that people forget you exist until something breaks. Another advantage is that you have access to systems most employees never think about. Email logs, badge access records, security camera footage. It's all there if you know where to look. I started with the basics. Fina's email account showed regular correspondence with Kurt going back 6 months. Nothing explicitly romantic in the subject lines, but the timing was interesting. Messages sent after hours, on weekends, during business trips when I thought she was working late. Then I dug deeper. Our security system logged every badge swipe in the building. Fina's badge showed her leaving the office at normal times, but Kurt's showed him staying late on the same nights, sometimes until midnight or later. The executive floor had a conference room with a couch and a locked door, perfect for privacy. My computer chimed with an instant message. "Beck, can you come to my office?" Zoya Haldenor. Fina's boss, the VP of marketing, and one of the most intimidating women I'd ever met. She was in her early 40s, with silver-streaked hair and the kind of sharp intelligence that made grown men stutter. Fina worshipped her, constantly trying to impress her with increasingly elaborate marketing campaigns. I saved my work and headed to the executive floor. Zoya's office was a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that cost more than my annual salary. She was standing behind her desk when I knocked, still as a predator waiting for prey. "Close the door," she said without preamble. I did, then took the seat across from her desk. She studied me for a long moment, her dark eyes unreadable. "Quite a show Friday night," she said finally. "I thought so." "Fina's been telling people you had some kind of breakdown. Too much to drink, jealousy issues, that sort of thing." "And what do you think?" A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "I think you're smarter than people give you credit for." She opened her desk drawer and pulled out a USB drive, setting it on the desk between us. "What's that?" I asked. "Insurance," she said. "For the past 3 months, I've been investigating some irregularities in our marketing budget. Expenses that don't add up, contracts with vendors that don't seem to exist, that sort of thing." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. "The trail leads back to 2 people," Zoya continued. Your wife and her new boyfriend. They've been skimming money through fake consulting contracts, splitting the profits between offshore accounts. You have proof? Enough to send them both to prison, but I'd rather handle this internally, if possible. Bad publicity hurts everyone. She slid the USB drive across the desk. Everything's on there. Financial records, email chains, even some security footage of them meeting with their accomplices. I picked up the drive, feeling its weight. Such a small thing to hold so much power. Why give this to me? I asked. Because you have access to systems I don't, and because I suspect you're planning something that will be much more satisfying than a simple termination. She was right, of course, but I was curious about her motives. What do you get out of this? A clean department and the removal of two people who thought they were smarter than they actually are. She leaned back in her chair. Plus, I've always liked you, Beck. You're genuine in a building full of fakes. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Fina. Stop ignoring me. This is ridiculous. She's getting nervous, Zoya observed, probably wondering why you haven't come crawling back yet. Let her wonder. What's your next move? I stood up, pocketing the USB drive. I need to verify this information. Then I need to decide how much pain I want to cause. The beauty of having options, Zoya said. Take your time, but not too much time. I'd like this resolved before the quarterly board meeting. As I walked back to my office, my phone rang. Fina's number. Hello, I answered. Finally. Beck, we really need to talk. I think there's been a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. You made things pretty clear Friday night. I was drinking, I was stressed about work, I said things I didn't mean. Which part didn't you mean? The part where you called me mediocre? Or the part where you let Kurt put his hands all over you? Silence on the other end. Beck, please, can we just meet for coffee? Talk this through like adults? I'm at work, Fina. Some of us have jobs to do. Don't be like this. You're being childish. I'm being practical. I'll talk to you when I'm ready. I hung up before she could respond. Back at my desk, I plugged in Zoya's USB drive and started reviewing the files. She hadn't been exaggerating. The evidence was overwhelming. Bank transfers, forged signatures, email conversations between Fina and Kurt planning their next move. They'd stolen over $200,000 in the past 6 months. But the financial crimes were just the beginning. Buried in the email chains were personal messages that made my stomach turn. Fina describing our marriage as temporary convenience, Kurt joking about the computer nerd who pays her bills, plans for them to take a vacation together using the stolen money. The worst part was a message from 3 weeks ago, where Fina detailed her plan to humiliate me publicly before filing for divorce. The Halloween party wasn't a spontaneous breakdown. It was a calculated move to make me look unstable while positioning herself as the victim. I sat back in my chair, staring at the evidence on my screen. The old Beck would have been crushed by this betrayal. The new Beck was already planning his response. My computer chimed with another instant message, this one from an unexpected source. Heard about Friday night. You okay? B. Derron. My older brother, the family screw-up, currently working as a bartender downtown after his latest business venture collapsed. We hadn't spoken in months, but somehow he'd heard about my marital drama. I typed back, Fine. How did you hear? Cleo posted about it on social media, making you sound pretty pathetic. Cleo? Fina's best friend since college, a social media influencer with delusions of grandeur and a following of desperate 20-somethings. Of course she was involved. What did she say? Posted a story about toxic masculinity and men who can't handle successful women. Didn't name names, but the details were pretty specific. Perfect. Now my humiliation was being broadcast to thousands of strangers. I opened my browser and found Cleo's Instagram account. Sure enough, there was a series of posts from Saturday morning, each one describing Friday night's events with increasing drama. She painted Fina as a strong woman finally standing up to her controlling husband, and me as a jealous loser who couldn't handle rejection. The comments were brutal. Hundreds of people who had never met me calling me everything from pathetic to probably abusive. Cleo was eating up the attention, responding to comments, and adding more details with each reply. That's when I realized the scope of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just about Fina and Kurt anymore. They had allies, people invested in their version of events. People who would work to destroy my reputation while building theirs. But I had advantages they didn't know about. Access to information, allies of my own, and most importantly, the element of surprise. I spent the rest of the day building my case, cross-referencing Zoya's evidence with my own findings. By 5 o'clock, I had enough material to destroy both Fina and Kurt, professionally and personally. The question was how to use it. Tuesday brought rain and the first real test of my resolve. Fina was waiting in the lobby when I arrived at work, looking perfectly composed in a navy business suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She'd positioned herself near the elevators where everyone would see us talking. "Beck," she said, standing as I approached, "I'm glad you're here early. We really need to discuss this situation." "What situation?" I asked, not breaking stride toward the elevator bank. "Don't play games. You know exactly what I'm talking about." She fell into step beside me, her heels clicking on the marble floor. People are starting to ask questions about Friday night. The elevator arrived and we stepped inside together. Fina waited until the doors closed before continuing. "I've been thinking about what happened, and I realize we both said things we didn't mean. Maybe we can work this out?" "Work what out?" "Our marriage, Beck. 3 years together means something." I studied her reflection in the polished steel doors. Even now, trying to manipulate me, she was beautiful. It would have been easy to fall for this performance, to let her convince me that Friday night was just a misunderstanding. "What about Kurt?" I asked. "What about him? Oh, he's a colleague, nothing more." The elevator stopped at the 8th floor. As the doors opened, I turned to face her directly. "Fina, I've been married to you for 3 years. I know when you're lying." Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. "Fine," she said. "Maybe I've been unhappy. Maybe I've been thinking about whether we're right for each other, but that doesn't mean we can't work things out." "It does when you've been stealing money from the company." The color drained from her face. "What are you talking about?" "Have a good day, Fina." I stepped off the elevator, leaving her standing there as the doors closed. Through the glass wall of the lobby, I could see her frantically pushing buttons, probably trying to follow me up to my floor. My phone started ringing before I reached my office. "Beck, what did you mean about stealing money? Beck, answer me." I let it go to voicemail and got to work. The USB drive from Zoya had given me the foundation, but I needed more. I spent the morning digging through server logs, tracking every file access, every email, every digital footprint that Fina and Kurt had left behind. What I found was even worse than I'd expected. They hadn't just been skimming money, they'd been building a complete exit strategy. Fake vendor contracts that funneled cash to offshore accounts, forged approval signatures, even plans to blame the missing funds on other employees when they finally left the company. But the most interesting discovery was buried in Kurt's email archive, correspondence with a headhunter about positions at competing firms. He was planning to jump ship within the next month, taking Fina with him and leaving Meridian Industries holding the bag for their crimes. My computer chimed with an instant message from Zoya. "Conference room C in 10 minutes. Bring your findings." Conference room C was on the executive floor, a windowless space used for sensitive meetings. When I arrived, Zoya was already there with Nessa Halvor, our HR director. Nessa was a thin woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the personality of a tax audit. She'd been with the company for 15 years and took rule violations personally. "Beck," Zoya said as I entered, "thank you for coming. I've been briefing Nessa on our situation." Nessa looked up from a stack of papers. "I understand you've discovered some irregularities involving your wife and Mr. Milan." "That's one way to put it," I said, taking a seat across from them. "Show her what you found," Zoya instructed. I connected my laptop to the room's display screen and began walking them through the evidence. Bank transfers, forged documents, email conversations planning their escape. Nessa's expression grew darker with each revelation. "This is extensive," she said finally. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 6 months that I can prove, possibly longer." "And the total amount?" "Just over $200,000. Nessa made a note on her legal pad. "That's a felony. Multiple felonies, actually." "Which brings us to the question of how to proceed," Zoya said. "We could turn this over to the police immediately, but that would mean publicity, investigations, potential damage to the company's reputation." "Or," Nessa asked, "we handle it internally. Termination, restitution, signed agreements to prevent them from working in the industry again." Nessa considered this. "What's your preference, Mr. Derron? These are serious crimes against you personally as well as the company." I'd been thinking about this question all morning. The safe play was to let HR handle everything professionally. Fina and Kurt would be fired, possibly prosecuted, and I could move on with my life. But that wouldn't be enough. Not after Friday night, not after the social media campaign, not after 3 years of being made to feel like I wasn't good enough. "I want them to experience consequences," I said. "Real consequences that match the damage they've done." Zoya smiled. What did you have in mind? Give me a week. Let me gather more evidence, document everything thoroughly. Then we'll present them with a choice: public humiliation and criminal prosecution, or quiet resignation with full restitution. That's risky, Nessa warned. If they realize what's happening, they might destroy evidence or flee. They won't, I said. They think I'm just a jealous husband having a breakdown. They have no idea what we know. Nessa looked to Zoya, who nodded. 1 week, Nessa said. But I want daily updates, and if there's any indication they're planning to run, we move immediately. As we filed out of the conference room, Zoya caught my arm. You're enjoying this, she observed. Should I feel guilty about that? Not at all. Just remember, the goal is to remove them completely. Don't let personal feelings cloud your judgment. She was right, of course. But as I walked back to my office, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was about more than just corporate crime. This was about 3 years of being dismissed, underestimated, and treated like a convenience rather than a partner. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Heard you're causing trouble for Fina. Back off, or you'll regret it. K. Kurt was getting nervous. Good. I forwarded the message to my personal email and saved a screenshot. Threatening messages would be useful evidence later. The rest of the day passed quietly. I continued building my case, documenting every transaction, every forged signature, every piece of evidence that would be needed for termination or prosecution. By the time I left the office, I had enough material to end both their careers permanently, but I wasn't done yet. That evening, I drove to Brawler's Gym, a converted warehouse on the east side where I'd trained during my boxing days. The owner, Tommy Kowalski, was a former middleweight who'd taken more punches than he'd given, but still moved like a fighter. Beck Derron, he said as I walked through the door. Haven't seen you in months. You finally ready to get back in the ring? Just need to hit something, I said. He led me to a heavy bag in the corner, wrapped my hands, and left me alone with my thoughts. For 30 minutes, I pounded out my frustration on the leather and canvas. Each punch was a memory. Fina's laughter at the party, Kurt's smirk, the humiliation of walking away while everyone watched. But with each round, the anger transformed into something colder and more focused. By the time I was finished, my hands were sore and my shirt was soaked with sweat, but my mind was clear. I knew exactly what I was going to do. By Thursday, the walls were closing in on Fina and Kurt, though they didn't know it yet. I'd spent 3 days methodically documenting their crimes, building an airtight case that would destroy them professionally and personally. But the most satisfying discovery came from an unexpected source. Cleo's social media campaign against me had backfired spectacularly. It started when one of her followers recognized details from her anonymous story and connected them to Meridian Industries. Within hours, people were posting screenshots of her Instagram stories alongside speculation about who the toxic husband might be. Someone found our company directory and started matching names to faces. By Wednesday night, your Meridian drama was trending locally, with hundreds of people dissecting every detail of Friday night's party. Most of the comments were still critical of me, but a few people had started asking questions about Cleo's motives and whether her version of events was accurate. That's when I decided to give them something real to talk about. I created an anonymous email account and sent a carefully worded message to 3 local business reporters. Nothing specific, just a suggestion that they might want to look into some interesting financial irregularities at a prominent local tech company. I included just enough detail to point them in the right direction without revealing my sources. Friday morning brought the first crack in Fina and Kurt's facade. I was in my office reviewing security footage when my computer chimed with an instant message from Kurt. We need to talk. Conference room B, now. Conference room B was on the sales floor, Kurt's territory. I could have ignored the message, but I was curious about what he wanted to say. I found him pacing behind the conference table, his usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. He'd loosened his tie, and his hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. Close the door, he said without preamble. I did, then took a seat at the far end of the table. What's this about, Kurt? You know exactly what this is about. The threats, the accusations, whatever game you're playing. I'm not playing any games. Right. It's just a coincidence that someone's been asking questions about our expense reports. Just a coincidence that Nessa from HR has been requesting meetings with our vendors. I shrugged. Maybe they're just doing their jobs. Kurt slammed his hand on the table. Don't mess with me, Beck. I know you're behind this. Behind what, exactly? The investigation. The questions. All of it. He leaned forward, trying to intimidate me. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off whatever you've started, and in exchange, I won't make your life any more miserable than it already is. And if I don't, Then I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. Controlling, jealous, probably violent. Fina's already told me about your anger issues. I stood up slowly, keeping my movements calm and controlled. Kurt was bigger than me, but I'd spent years in boxing rings with men who could actually fight. Kurt, I said quietly, I want you to listen very carefully. In about 10 minutes, you're going to receive an email from HR requesting a meeting on Monday morning. When you get that email, I want you to remember this conversation. His face went pale. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the $200,000 you and Fina have stolen from this company. I'm talking about the forged signatures, the fake vendor contracts, the offshore accounts. I'm talking about the evidence that's going to end your career and possibly send you to prison. Kurt's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. But here's the thing, I continued. I'm not the one who discovered your crimes. That was your boss, Zoya, who's been investigating financial irregularities for months. I just helped her connect the dots. You're bluffing. Am I? I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of one of his emails to Fina. Recognize this? It's from last Tuesday, where you discuss moving more money before anyone notices the missing funds. Kurt lunged across the table, trying to grab my phone. I stepped back easily, letting his momentum carry him into the wall. Careful, I said. Assaulting a coworker would be a termination offense even without the embezzlement charges. He straightened his jacket, trying to recover his composure. This isn't over. Actually, it is. The only question now is whether you want to resign quietly or be escorted out by security. I left him standing there and walked back to my office. True to my prediction, his computer would be chiming with an HR meeting request within minutes. My phone rang as I reached my desk. Fina's number. What did you do? She demanded without preamble. Good morning to you too. Kurt just called me. He's talking nonsense about investigations and evidence. What did you tell him? The truth. What truth? Beck, you're scaring me. For the first time since this started, she sounded genuinely frightened rather than angry or manipulative. The truth about the money you've been stealing. The truth about your plans to leave the company and blame other people for your crimes. The truth about everything. Silence on the other end of the line. Fina? Are you there? Beck, I don't know what you think you know, but I know about the Cayman Islands account. I know about the fake consulting contracts with Morrison Enterprises. I know about the forged approval signatures using my digital credentials. Another long silence. How? She whispered. Does it matter? The point is, it's over. HR knows, your boss knows, and by Monday morning, everyone else will know too. We can fix this. We can pay the money back, claim it was a mistake. We? There is no we anymore, Fina. You made that clear Friday night. Beck, please. I know I hurt you, but we can work this out. We're married. We're supposed to be a team. Teams don't steal from each other. Teams don't humiliate each other in public. Teams don't plan to frame each other for crimes. I never planned to frame you. Really? Then explain why you used my digital signature on half the fraudulent contracts. No response. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. Monday morning, you and Kurt are going to meet with HR and Zoya. You're going to be presented with evidence of your crimes and given a choice. Resign immediately and arrange full restitution, or face criminal prosecution. And if we choose resignation? Then you get to leave quietly, with your reputations mostly intact. You'll never work in this industry again, but you won't go to prison. What about us, our marriage? I looked at the wedding ring I'd placed on my desk after Friday night's party. Such a small thing to represent 3 years of my life. There is no us. There hasn't been for months, maybe longer. I was just too stupid to see it. Beck, I hung up the phone. Within an hour, both Fina and Kurt had called in sick for the rest of the day. By evening, Cleo's social media accounts had gone silent. Word was spreading through the company grapevine that something big was happening, though no one knew exactly what. I spent the weekend at my brother Brand's apartment, helping him tend bar at his downtown dive. It felt good to work with my hands again, to serve drinks to people who didn't care about corporate politics or stolen money or cheating wives. You seem different, Brand observed during a lull between customers. Different how? Calmer, like you've made peace with something. He was right. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like myself again. Not the corporate drone trying to live up to Fina's expectations, not the jealous husband wondering why he wasn't good enough, but the person I'd been before I'd convinced myself I needed to be someone else. Monday morning would bring the final confrontation, the moment when Fina and Kurt would have to face the consequences of their choices, but I was ready for it now, ready to watch their world collapse the way mine had on Friday night. The difference was, I'd learned something from the experience. They were about to learn something too. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp October clarity that makes everything seem sharper, more defined. I dressed carefully, my best suit, the navy one Fina had bought me for our anniversary, press shirt, conservative tie. If this was going to be a performance, I wanted to look the part. I arrived at Meridian Industries early, as had become my habit, and spent an hour reviewing my notes one final time. Everything was documented, cross-referenced, and backed up in multiple locations. Zoya had scheduled the meeting for 10 o'clock in the large conference room on the executive floor, the one with the imposing oak table and windows overlooking downtown Cleveland. At 9:30, I made my way upstairs. Zoya was already there, along with Nessa from HR and two people I didn't recognize, a man and woman in expensive suits who had the unmistakable look of corporate attorneys. The table was covered with manila folders, each one labeled with names and dates. "Beck," Zoya said as I entered, "thank you for being here. I'd like you to meet our legal team, Patricia Hendricks and James Morrison from Caldwell and Associates." I shook hands with both lawyers, noting how they studied my face like they were memorizing details for later testimony. "Mr. Derron," Patricia said, "we've reviewed the evidence you and Ms. Haldenor have compiled. It's quite comprehensive." "Thank you." "Thus, before we proceed," James added, "I want to confirm that you understand your rights in this situation. As both a company employee and the spouse of one of the accused, you have certain protections under—" "I understand," I interrupted. "I'm here voluntarily, and I want to see this through." Zoya checked her watch. They should be here any minute. As if summoned by her words, there was a knock on the conference room door. Nessa opened it to reveal Fina and Kurt, both looking like they hadn't slept well. Fina was pale beneath her makeup, and Kurt's usual swagger had been replaced by nervous fidgeting. "Please, come in," Nessa said formally. "Take seats on that side of the table." They sat across from us, Fina's eyes finding mine immediately. I kept my expression neutral, professional. This wasn't about personal revenge anymore. It was about justice. "Thank you both for coming," Zoya began. "I know this is unusual, but we've discovered some serious irregularities that need to be addressed immediately." "What kind of irregularities?" Kurt asked, though his voice lacked conviction. Zoya opened the first folder and slid a stack of papers across the table. "Financial irregularities, specifically the theft of company funds through fraudulent consulting contracts and forged approval signatures." Fina picked up the papers with trembling hands. As she read, the color drained from her face completely. "I don't understand," she said weakly. "These numbers are accurate," Patricia Hendricks interrupted. "We've had our forensic accountants review everything. The total amount stolen is $217,463. Kurt leaned back in his chair like he'd been punched. "This is ridiculous. We haven't stolen anything." James Morrison opened his own folder and pulled out a laptop. "Perhaps this will refresh your memory." The laptop screen was connected to the room's display monitor. With a few keystrokes, James brought up an email chain between Fina and Kurt discussing their exit strategy and the need to move the money before anyone notices. "These are private communications?" Fina protested. "These are company communications," Nessa corrected. "Sent using company email servers, which means they're subject to monitoring and review under the terms of your employment contract." More emails appeared on screen, each one more damaging than the last. Plans to blame missing funds on other employees, discussions of offshore accounts, even jokes about my intelligence and likelihood of discovering their crimes. "This is entrapment," Kurt said desperately. "Someone's setting us up." "Who?" Zoya asked calmly. "Who would have access to your email accounts, your financial records, your digital signatures? Who would have the technical knowledge to fabricate months of evidence across multiple systems?" Kurt's eyes found mine across the table. "Him. Beck's been planning this whole thing." "Mr. Derron brought these irregularities to our attention," Patricia acknowledged. "But the evidence speaks for itself. Are you claiming that your colleague somehow forced you to send these emails, forced you to create fraudulent contracts, forced you to transfer money to accounts in your names?" The room fell silent, except for the sound of Fina's quiet sobbing. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "That depends on you," Zoya said. "We're prepared to offer you a choice." She slid two identical documents across the table. Option 1. You resign immediately, forfeit all benefits and severance, arrange full restitution of the stolen funds within 30 days, and sign agreements preventing you from working in this industry again. In exchange, we handle this matter internally without involving law enforcement. "And option 2? Kurt asked. "We turn everything over to the FBI and let them decide whether to prosecute," James Morrison said. "Federal charges for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy typically carry sentences of 10 to 20 years. Fina looked at the resignation papers like they were written in a foreign language. I need time to think, she said. You have until 5 o'clock today, Nessa replied. After that, the offer expires and we proceed with criminal referral. This is insane. Kurt stood up abruptly. You can't prove any of this in court. Actually, we can, Patricia said. We have digital evidence, financial records, witness testimony, and security footage of you accessing restricted areas after hours. Any competent prosecutor would consider this a career-making case. Kurt looked around the room like a trapped animal, his gaze finally settling on me. You think you've won something here? He said. You think destroying us is going to fix your pathetic life? I stood up slowly, keeping my voice calm and level. This isn't about winning or losing, Kurt. It's about consequences. You and Fina made choices, and now you're facing the results of those choices. Consequences? Kurt laughed bitterly. You want to talk about consequences? Your wife was miserable with you, miserable and bored and desperate for someone who could actually satisfy her. Kurt, stop, Fina whispered, but he was beyond listening. You want to know what she told me about you? About how you'd given up on everything that made you interesting? About how she had to fake? I moved faster than I'd intended, crossing the room in 3 quick steps. Kurt flinched backward, but I didn't touch him. Instead, I leaned in close enough that only he could hear me. If you finish that sentence, I said quietly, I'll make sure the FBI knows about your gambling debts and the money you owe to some very unforgiving people in Detroit. His face went white. That's right, I continued. I know about that too. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit down, sign those papers, and walk out of here with whatever dignity you have left. Because if you don't, I'll make sure your next problem isn't just the FBI. Kurt sat down heavily, all the fight gone out of him. The rest of the meeting was procedural. Signatures on resignation letters, arrangements for returning company property, details about restitution payments. Fina signed without speaking, tears streaming down her face. Kurt scrawled his name like he was signing his own execution warrant. As they gathered their things to leave, Fina approached me one last time. Beck, she said softly, I know you probably hate me, but I want you to know that I did love you. At the beginning. I know, I said. But love isn't enough when there's no respect. She nodded and walked away. I stayed in the conference room after everyone else had left, looking out the windows at the city below. 3 years of my life had just ended, along with 2 careers and a friendship that had never been as real as I'd thought. My phone buzzed with a text from Bran. Heard through the grapevine that something big went down at your office. You okay? I typed back, better than okay, I'm free. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, that was absolutely true. The old Beck would have felt guilty about what had happened to Fina and Kurt. The new Beck understood that some people only learn through consequences, and some consequences are exactly what people deserve. I gathered my notes and headed back to my office. There was work to do, a life to rebuild, and a future to plan. But first, I was going to enjoy the satisfaction of watching 2 people who thought they were smarter than everyone else discover just how wrong they'd been. Outside, storm clouds were gathering over Cleveland, but inside Meridian Industries, the air had never been clearer.